Proverbs tonight. So if you would, grab your Bibles and go ahead and open up to Proverbs. And that's where we're going to be tonight. Tonight we're going to talk about friends. But you know, I can't teach a class without telling a bunch of stories, and tonight has been a story already. So prepping for the class over the last few days, I made all kinds of notes. Had my Bible and my notes laid out. I couldn't get my printer to print these things for me. So I knew I was going to have to run to the office. So I hustled to the office. I finally get it to print. Y'all can tell I printed it from my phone. Somebody pointed out that my phone needs charging. That is true. I get here, reach over for my Bible and my notes. There's no Bible. There's no notes. My cat is probably reading them right now because they're on the kitchen table. But I am super excited to get to teach. I always love to teach. I think it's absolutely hilarious that I'm teaching a class about wisdom. You know, when you look out over a congregation, you think, well, you should probably find an old guy, maybe a guy with gray hair, like Aaron, to teach a class like this. And then I'll pass by the mirror and I'm looking at it and I'm thinking, wait a minute, I am the old guy with gray hair. So maybe I should be teaching it. But we picked last week on Joey. This week we're gonna talk good about Joey, because I actually do have him in some of my stories that I have to tell. I'm gonna ask one of my favorite human beings to lead us in prayer. I get to hang out with Cade every now and then and play a little golf. And when we get out there to where our golf balls land, his is the one that's like way out there, him and Joey, and I'm the one way back here. I really don't like that, but I've gotten to get to hang around him, and I've asked him if he would lead us in a prayer. And y'all don't know what that means to me, that he would want to do that. I love it when our young men want to step forward and do some things. That leads to wisdom, and that is exactly what we're going to talk about. Kate, if you would, let's go ahead and pray.
Dear God, thank you for this beautiful day. Thank you for everything you've given us. Thank you for letting us all come here to worship you tonight. And please for all the ones that weren't able to come here and be with them, and all the people that are traveling and keep them safe. Please be with the families in Texas, since they mourn some of the most loved ones. And please be all the sick and injured. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Okay, so I didn't get to be here. I was out of town on the very, very first class where Lawson did an introduction. So guess what? Y'all get to sit through a brief introduction from me because I didn't get to be here for it. Tell me this: what is a proverb to you? What is a proverb to you? I want book definition. I want your definition. Somebody, what is it?
It's a wise saying.
Okay. Anything else?
It's usually short.
Okay.
Quick fixes.
Pardon?
Quick fixes.
Quick fixes. That's good.
Little nuggets of wisdom.
Oh, you stole my line. Okay, that's what I was looking for. Little nuggets of wisdom. Okay, so if you had never heard of this book called the Bible, and one day you ran across this book, and you picked it up and you read the Old Testament, from the beginning to the end of the Old Testament, what's different about Proverbs than any other book in here? What's different about it? So if you picked it up and you read Genesis, does Genesis read like Proverbs? No, not even close. What about even Song of Solomon or Habakkuk or any of those? Do they? Well, it's different, isn't it? And I've heard people group Psalms and Proverbs together. Well, that's not even the same, are they? Because if you read through Psalms, and I did this last night just in preparation for thinking about what I wanted to say about this. Psalms is a book of praise, worship, those kind of things. Proverbs is just different because it's words of wisdom. It's those little nuggets of wisdom. we've been talking about these kinds of things, and tonight we're going to be on a subject that I really wanted to teach this one. So when we were going through and we were kind of divvying up who's going to talk about what, I asked Lawson, I said, do you mind if I take the one on friendship? And this goes all the way back to when I was a kid. You're going to have to listen to some stories about that in a minute. It certainly has to do when I was in college. And guess what? It even has to do with my life now. All right. So if you open up to the first book, the first chapter there, this is a father giving advice to his son. And if you look in verse 8 there, he says, "My son, hear the instruction of your father and do not forsake the law of your mother." So he's just basically telling him to listen there. He says in verse 10, "My son, if sinners entice you, do not consent. If they say, 'Come with us,' let us lie in wait to shed blood. Let us lurk secretly for the innocent without cause. Let us swallow them alive like Sheol, and whole like those who go down to the pit. We shall find all kinds of precious possessions. We shall fill our houses with spoil. Cast in your lot among us. Let us all have one purse. My son, do not walk in the way with them. Keep your foot from their path, for their feet run to evil." If you were reading this book for the first time, and the very first chapter was that, what's your opinion about that? That's pretty blunt and direct, isn't it? So you've been reading all these books and you get to Psalms and it's all these blessings and that kind of thing, and then you read this right here and you're like, what on earth is this? And if I'm reading it as a today Christian, because I like to look at things like this, what does all this have to do with me? All right, so here's where we get to go all the way back to the Hammer household as a child. When my twin brother and I got to school, yes, I have a twin brother. He is older though. And Ryan can tell you, he is not nearly as clean cut and good looking, right?
No, not even close.
Thank you. You know, he became a referee, so he didn't display as much wisdom in his life, did he? All right, so going back to when we were kids. In first grade, I remember Mom and Dad sitting us down on the couch and saying, "Hey, of all these kids in your class, we're going to try and help you figure out who your friends should be." Man, I'll never forget that. As a first grader thinking, okay, why can't I be friends with Ray? Okay, why can't I be friends with Tommy? Because they're a lot cooler than Charles. And they were a lot cooler than Jimmy. Why can't I be friends with him? So I remember asking Dad, okay, what's wrong with Ray and Tommy? And he said, "I want to read you something. We came here." Okay, as a first grader, I'm sitting there thinking, you're talking about blood, you're talking about killing people, you're talking about all this stuff. What does that have to do with Ray and Tommy? Okay, his point was, he knew their family. He knew these kids. He knew these friends were going to influence us way more than my dad and my mom would for the next 5, 6, 7 years. Pick the right ones to be friends with. Now that bled over into our birthday parties and different things like that. Because guess whose birthday parties we weren't allowed to go to? Ray and Tommy. Guess whose birthday party we did go to? Chris and Mark and Jimmy. Why? Because they all went to church with us. You see my point? Now, flash forward to, well, I don't even want to say the year, college. My brother and I, Mom and Dad couldn't afford us to have separate rooms, so we shared a dorm room. But when we came to Western, there were 5 of us from back home that were very close friends. 4 of the 5 of us actually went to the Church of Christ. The 5th one didn't, but he was very faithful at where he went. Not one of us had ever tasted any alcohol, had a drug of any kind, didn't run around. Well, we might have chased some girls, but we never actually caught one. Okay, so 5 of us. And Mom and Dad were very comfortable with us being in that little pocket and said, make those your friends. When we got to campus, oh my goodness, 3 of those 5 went crazy because they weren't at home anymore. They didn't go to church anymore. They went to parties. They drank a lot. One of them we found out went into drug rehab. We didn't even know that. But I saw enough. We arrived on campus in the first couple of weeks of August. I saw enough that I can remember sitting on a bed and my brother and I facing each other across the room, and we're like, okay, what are we going to do? Because these 3 friends that we've been with since we were in 1st grade, we can't be friends with them anymore. They're going to leave, they're going to get us in trouble. And I didn't even know how true that was until 25 years later. Doug, one of those friends who had been a lifelong member of the Church of Christ, came to visit me in Bowling Green, and he said, you got time for lunch? I said, sure. So we go to lunch, and we're sitting down eating, and he said, I need to tell you something that happened when we arrived on campus as freshmen. He said, in September, he said, on a Thursday night, we all went to a movie. And he said, if you remember, we took my car and we're coming back to campus, and there was a police sobriety checkpoint. And he said, do you remember me grabbing you and throwing you behind the wheel? And I told you I was too nervous to drive. You was going to have to drive through the checkpoint. I said, yeah. And he said, that wasn't what was going on. He said, I was high that night. I had taken drugs. And he said, I knew I couldn't pass a sobriety test. I knew you wouldn't test positive for anything or have it. So I remember that. First of all, if I had had any idea he was doing anything, I would not have been in that car. But he was one of those guys that took 25 years later for him to tell me the truth about what happened that night. And I'm so glad that I pushed away those friends. And I know what I did. And my brother did it too. What do you think we found? True friends? What do you think we found?
The Lord's family.
Go.
The Lord's family.
Absolutely. I remember going to the old 12th Street Church of Christ. And I know Alan Crystal know where it's at. Anybody else here worship there? Yo, I know you did, Crystal. I think Alan did too, right? Okay. Yes, me too. That's where we were married. But I remember going to the old 12th Street Church of Christ, walking in, and I'm looking around and saying, there's got to be 50 kids my age here. And I walked right up in the middle of that group and sat down. For long, I knew just about every one of those. And if I wasn't there, 1 or 2 of those would call and say, hey, missed you Sunday. Or, hey, we missed you Wednesday night. Boy, at a time in my life when I really needed that, I had somebody helping me look out for me. That's where I went. I went to surround myself with the right kinds of friends. So for the next, maybe this class and half of the next class, that's kind of what we're going to talk about. All right, so I've given you a handout there. Actually, Lawson, I think, sat down and put most of this together with Eric, and I haven't had an opportunity to sit down and study with him on this yet. So I was telling Eric the funny story about me running off and leaving all those notes, those good notes I'd left, and I said, "Has that ever happened to you?" And he said, "In true Eric form, no, that's never happened to me." Thanks, Eric, you're making me feel better. Turn to Proverbs 12, verse 26. Somebody read that if you would. Well, it's actually right there. Ryan, you got that?
12:26.
Yes.
One who is righteous is a guide to his neighbor, but the way of the wicked leads them astray.
All right, so I couldn't have thought of a better way to start this than that proverb right there. The righteous choose their friends carefully, is what it's saying, but the way of the wicked leads them astray. My entire thought process tonight was that right there. Choose your friends carefully. Now, if any of you all know much about me, you know I'm a sports junkie. I used to play a lot of basketball. You know who I played basketball with? Some guy named Brandon that has the sharpest elbows you've ever played with in your life, right? He will tear your arm off and throw it up in the crowd if you get a rebound over him, I promise you. Okay. Well, you know what? As a matter of fact, I see a smiling face back there I'm going to point a finger at. Carter started playing with us before I got elderly and retired. What's my point? I love sports. I want to play with Christian people. Guess what? There's a whole group of those guys that meet. Y'all meet just about every Sunday afternoon, don't you? And play basketball. I got sports. I surround myself with good Christian people. So guess what? They keep me roped in. Now, see these two unlikely looking suspects up here? I retired from basketball and I started chasing that little round golf ball. Because you know what? You can swing at that thing and it's sitting still. Why am I pointing out these two suspects? Because I play a lot of golf with these guys. And some knucklehead named John Whitaker. I couldn't find anybody else to play with, so I played with John. Why? What's my point? I would love to play golf. But I love to play with people that have the same moral fiber. They're headed the same place. They understand that truly, it doesn't matter how they play. It's how they conducted themselves and they enjoyed themselves. They enjoyed the company of someone else. That is a Christian. I can't tell you how many times I've had a problem, maybe even something from here at West End on my mind. And I'll call John Whitaker up and say, what are you doing Friday at lunch for a couple hours? We'll go out and play some of the worst golf you've ever seen a human play. Don't testify to that over here. But guess what? I'll tell him what my thoughts are on a problem or something here, and I'll say, okay, can I get your insight on that? What do you think? How should we react to this? Is this something we should do something about, or is this something we need to kind of let the elders decide what, we've done that many, many times. Now, where am I headed with all this? Man, I wish somebody had had that discussion with me when I was little. Yes, they did. That was Mom and Dad. And then my brother and I talking it out when we got to college. I just want to take a minute and hear from you guys. How do you choose your friends? Let's just talk. Anybody here ever chosen a bad friend that got them in trouble? Have you had that happen? Nobody? Am I the only knucklehead that's ever...
I've been hurt by
If you name me as your bad friend, I'm gonna be really upset.
We've probably been a bad friend more than some of us. Some of y'all.
Joey?
I mean, that was basically me in high school. I didn't choose wisely, and it led me down the wrong paths for a long time. It's one of the things about Proverbs. He's telling his sons things that he knows.
That's right.
How does he know these things?
I'm glad you said that.
It's kind of like a farmer's commercial, He knows a few things because he's seen a few things.
Yep. Because I had those notes I have on the kitchen table, they're sensational, by the way. Walked into a classroom one night here at West End, and I saw a drawing on the board, and I asked the teacher, who happened to be Mary Lou Salee, okay, what were you trying to get across here? And she said, now, I can't draw, y'all. So, and my wife is going to remind me of this when I get home and tell her what I did. One time when Reagan was 3, we were sitting in church, the old 12th Street building, and Reagan elbows me because I'm sitting to her left, and she says, hey, Dad, draw me a horsey. So I take it real quick. We've got 3 minutes before it starts. I whip out the best horse you've ever seen in your life. I hand it back to her. You know, the memory of a 3-year-old isn't much. She looks at it. She looks up at me. She said, what's this? Okay, my wife, knowing that, says, it's okay for you to teach. Just don't ever draw anything. I'm going to break that rule. So Mary Lee did this. She drew something kind of like that and put dotted lines down the middle of it like that. And she said, all right, you kids, because it was a kids class she was teaching. You kids, you guys are right here. This is where you are. She said, me and Lowell, yeah, we are way down here. She said, we're further down the road. You can't even see that far down the road. And she said, wouldn't it be great to ask us about all the potholes that are in that road out there that we need to avoid? Because we hit some of those potholes. Bam! You could have taken the 2 before it hit me between the eyes. How much sense does that make? You know what? As a teenager, that would have been cool to know, right? But I didn't want to hear it from my mom and dad. I did a lot, but my dad was like E.F. Hutton. He didn't talk much, but if he did talk, you better listen. You're fixing to get a nugget of wisdom from him. But yeah, so I know if I ask Kate and Chloe here, you all always listen to Joey, right? Because of all those wisdom things he's laying on you. And I probably could ask Chloe because she's now at that age. How much smarter did Joey get from when you were 14 to when you're your age now? Did he get a lot smarter? He did, didn't he? I wouldn't have wanted to admit that about my mom and dad because I distinctly remember at 14 saying to my brother one day, man, they don't know anything. They must be the most backward parents that have ever lived. They've never experienced anything. What's up with them? And then we were at college graduation, and my dad and mom were talking about something or other, and my brother says, I think we've heard that before, hadn't we? Yeah. It kind of works that way. Now, in context of what we're looking at here, this is, if you want to call it the rantings and ravings of a parent trying to warn their child, that's especially what chapter 1 is here, talking about that kind of thing. Somebody relayed the story to me of Solomon and how he got so wise.
Prayed for wisdom.
That's right. He prayed for wisdom. What could Solomon have asked God for?
Anything.
He could have asked him for anything, couldn't he? And because he asked for wisdom, God blessed him with anything and everything he wanted. All the riches and wealth, the power, the glory, whatever on this earth could offer. Because he prayed for wisdom. Have you guys ever prayed for wisdom? Let me tell you, I know I'm talking about each one of your lives when I start this, but I'm going to talk about me for a minute. There have been things happen in my life that I would have never thought would have ever happened to me. Things that are a gut punch like you've never seen before. Things that even financially or health have affected me. Deaths and close people. At those times when something like that's going on, isn't it easy to pray for a solution? I need a solution. I need help. As silly as it sounds, I remember being in college one time and praying that this certain girl would notice me. Yeah, I saw that girl years later. Oh, I'm glad she couldn't see very well. Yeah. She probably could start for the football team right now. Sometimes God's wisdom is way beyond mine. So you know what? Somewhere along the way my prayer life became begging God for wisdom. And every time I read Proverbs, I think about that. He prayed for wisdom. Then he put some of that down in writing for those, his family, his followers, to read and to understand. If I had to tell you how many times I picked up, I'll just be thinking, okay, I finished whatever my reading is now. What do I want to read? Oh, I'm going to read some Proverbs. Just for that 2 before between the eyes and wake up call. Have y'all ever done that? Proverbs is one of the best books to read, Old or New Testament, because it relates so much to us. And we're going to talk a lot more about that. So in his outline here, you can see that he put down that, and you got to understand, Eric likes to talk in terms of themes. And he thinks that friendship has 2 different distinct powers. I guess we would call it power for good, power for bad. All right, we're going to talk about this. Let's start with bad. All right, so Proverbs 22, 24, and 25. Who's got that? Proverbs 22, 24, and 25.
Make no friendship with an angry man, and with a furious man do not go, lest you learn his ways and set a snare for your soul.
Ouch. Anybody ever had an angry person around them? Well, I'm going to tell you about my great uncle. When we were the size of peanuts running around the farm, we had, it was actually my mom's uncle. It was my granddad's brother. To this day, I don't think I've ever seen a man with as bad a temper as him. It was bad. He'd get mad and go off about nothing. Please tell me there's nobody in here like that. Right? Nobody. Okay, good. So we're going to talk about it. What's wrong with making friends with an angry man? What's wrong with it?
It changes your worldview of what's normal.
Yes, it does. I couldn't have said it better. It changes your perspective. He said it better, worldview, but your perspective, your view of things. Because you know what happens? You start hanging out with an angry person, you start displaying anger. Do you want to add something? You want to add to that? Do you want to talk about Eric?
No, but I was thinking something when you said that.
Go ahead.
How many people listen to talk show people who are very angry, you know, and then they start being angry about everything. You know, and I mean, that's a talk show people. I'm talking about like a podcast, or maybe you listen to, I was trying to think who's popular right now, but
The View.
yeah, The View, or one of those kind of shows, and you just get so angry about everything, and that becomes your focus. When you're around a person like that too, whatever they're angry about, you become suddenly angry about.
Yeah.
Or it's just human nature to fall into that. You know?
Absolutely. I love the way Brian put that. It changes your worldview. So what's wrong with hanging out with somebody that's bad, a bad influence? And they use, here we use the example of anger. Let me throw another one out to you. What about people that are complainers, chronic complainers? You know, I used to work at a job, and I had several people around me. And in one of those instances, I remember thinking, man, every one of these people complain about everything. I call it whining. They just whined about everything. You know, the owner could have come by and said, I'm giving you all a 10% raise. Hooray. No, they would complain because it wasn't 12. And you think, well, there's nothing wrong with that. But there can be, because who might that influence? You might fall into that trap. And all of a sudden, to be one of the cool kids, you complain about things. You ever caught yourself in that? I like, we're talking about friends and who you surround yourself with. I even remember a time in my life, and it hadn't been that long ago, a few years, that I was looking at the group of people that I was closest to and thinking, not one of those people is a ray of sunshine. They're not. Guess what? I'm not friends with those people anymore. Not one of them. I'm going to use a work example, and I'm going to get killed for this one, but I'm going to do it anyway because she's not in here. Anybody ever in here ever hear of Angie Cobb? Okay.
Can I record this?
Yes. Some of you don't know this. I work with Angie Cobb. I'm going to tell you a story about her. I talked to Greg one day out here about, I knew that the young lady that was working with me was going to be leaving. My number one assistant was going to be leaving, and I was going to have to replace that person. Now, the person that was leaving was a member of the Lord's Church. The worst complainer I've ever been around. Some days I would walk to the door like this and take a deep breath before I went in, because you're going to get hit with a hailstorm of complaints about everything. Well, when we decided there might be something better in life she would be better at, I decided I want to talk to Greg, see if Angie might be interested in working. Why? Have y'all ever, anybody in here, please tell me the truth. Has anybody in here ever seen Angie Cobb in a bad mood? Because I haven't. Angie Cobb's had a lot of problems in life. Angie's at home resting tonight. She's getting ready to go to Lexington in the morning to take another chemo treatment. You will never hear her complain about that or say anything negative. Everything is positive. So this morning, anyway, I did. I hired her. She works with me every day. My attitude has gone from here to way up there every single day. I can't wait to get to work. Today, we had 4 people just walk in today with problems. The first one caught Angie. She turned and smiled and she said, I'd be delighted to help you with that. And that little old lady looked around like you'd been shot. And she says, well, okay. She wasn't talking to a employee. She was talking to a friend then. That little old lady thought she was her friend. So I'm standing there working on something, and they hit the counter with the second one. And I looked up because I knew Angie's with this one, and I said, you know what, I'd love to help you. And then Angie got the third one, and the fourth one, I got to that person who was a crab, and I said, yes, sir, I would love to help you with that, because you know what? He had a hearing aid that didn't work. You know what I told him? Hey, we don't allow that here. They have to work. Just that positive energy. You know where I got it? I got it from a friend who had a great attitude. That's who I want to surround myself with. I'm a lot better person when I surround myself with the right friends. Now, if you read through Proverbs, and you've got to have a little bit of an open mind, because some of these have the negative connotation to it. That's what we're talking about here, the power for bad. But overall, if you look back, man, if you could just listen to that and turn it for the good. We're going to talk about that in a minute. Turn to Proverbs 13. And verse 20. Who's got that one? Aaron?
Whoever walks with the wise becomes wise, but the companion of fools will suffer harm.
Ouch. He who walks with wise men will be wise. Wow. Okay, I'm going to tell you about organic chemistry. Please tell me, every one of you that have finished up your schooling had to take organic chemistry, right? Did anybody take organic? Am I the only knucklehead that took organic chemistry? You do not want to ever take organic chemistry unless you have as many brain cells as Chloe. Right? Organic chemistry, when I was there, was the #1 rated toughest course on the campus. I ducked it, dodged it. I knew I had to take it, but I kept putting it off. Finally, I had to take it. Great. I drew the one professor. They said, you don't want that guy. Our classroom was at least this size, and my twin brother had already taken this class a couple years before. He gave me 2 pieces of advice. #1, go to class an hour before the class starts. He said, you'll understand when you get there. #2, pick out the smartest people in that class and hang out with them. Hope some of it rubs off on you. So here I am, I walk into this class and I sit down and looking, there was a blackboard the length of this wall, the width of that wall, and the length of that wall, and it was hieroglyphics. I couldn't read it, I couldn't understand it. I thought it was a foreign language. And I'm thinking, boy, I'm glad I didn't have that class. Ours can't possibly be that hard. That was our notes. And when he came into class, he started lecturing. He didn't say good morning, hi, I'm you. Nothing. He started lecturing. And I knew I'm in trouble. So as soon as the bell rang, I took out a clean sheet of paper and I stood up and I said, I'm forming a study group right here. Anybody want to join? Because you know what? The best and the brightest will join that study group. There were 5 people in that study group, including me, so I had me and 4 other people. We became really good friends. We studied every week. We had regular meeting hours, and we studied. Somehow, some way, they pulled me through that class, so their wisdom might have rubbed off on me a little bit. What's my point to all this? What's his point here when he says, he who walks with wise men will be wise? That's the point, isn't it? What happens if you walk with fools?
The saying garbage in, garbage out is applicable to this and everything that we do. 80-20 rule.
Absolutely.
And it applies, all those sayings apply to life, friendship, work, school.
Yep.
If you eat garbage, garbage is gonna come out. Whatever you ingest, that's what's gonna come out. In your mind, in your thoughts, speech.
Absolutely. And who's gonna influence that?
People you surround yourself with.
The people you surround yourself with. They're going to influence that more than anybody, right? Ryan, I'm going to ask you a question. Which are you? Which are you?
Both.
Which dominates?
I mean, I would like to be a leader.
Yeah. I remember Mom having this discussion with me when I went away to college. And she said, be a leader, don't be a follower. Ian, go ahead, I don't want to forget you. Okay. Why? Because leaders become the first people you're talking about here. Followers get sucked into the second one you're talking about here. I remember seeing one of those friends, I told you there were 5 of us, well, one of them did go off into trouble, and I remember one of the other guys going, okay, I'll go with you. It's like he didn't have a brain. What are you thinking? But when I ditched those guys and I surrounded myself with Christians, man, I went through 4 years of college. I never saw a drug, not one. How do you do that? Nobody ever walked up to me and said, hey, want to smoke a joint? Why? Because I always surrounded myself with the right kind of people. I'm convinced I'm still alive today because I did that. That wasn't me being smart. That was me listening to mom and dad saying, hey, pay attention here. Now, this could go into so many different directions. And I'm going to ask a question. I tell you what, let me get to Ian first because I don't want to.
No, that's fine. There's no good question. My extends employees.
Okay, so have any of you ever chosen to change jobs? Change jobs or change careers because you found yourself trapped into a bad situation here? Have you ever had to do that? Anybody? Nobody's ever done that? Man, y'all live a lot better lives than I have, huh? Aaron.
The only time I hated going to work somewhere is when I left Florida, was recruited to Virginia, and found myself surrounded by people that didn't think the way I was taught and appreciated.
How'd that affect you every day?
It was horrible. I've dug ditches, I've done everything, and I've never hated my job until then.
Did you kind of feel like, okay, you got that little voice on one shoulder, let's see, I guess this would be the good shoulder, saying, Aaron, you know who you're supposed to be. But you got that other little voice over here saying, yeah, but all the cool kids are doing this. And you felt like it was a constant rub, a constant fight. I'll give you an example that doesn't relate to friendship. One of the jobs that I went to, there was a lady there, a 27-year veteran at that location. When I was hired, I was hired to be her manager. Not her manager, but just there were 9 total people there. I was supposed to be the manager over all those people. At that time in my life, I probably shouldn't have been a manager over anybody. But the guy that hired me said, before you report to your job, stop at my office for a 10-minute talk. You know what he told me? He said, I don't know what's wrong out there, but you got a problem out there and you got to fix it fast. He said, you've got a veteran out there, she'll help you. Guess who the problem was? Oh, by the way, Crystal's mom worked with me there. She was not the problem. She was a fun one, good one to work with. So I better make that clearer or Sue will be calling me. No. Okay, so the point was this. I quickly found out the problem was the person that was supposed to be helping me fix the problem. She was the most negative person. If I said, hey, we're going to try this to reach our goals, she would say, that will never work. Well, guess what? I'm sitting there thinking, man, I'm a rookie. She's a veteran. She says it won't work. It may not work. See how she influenced me? We can fall into that trap in our lives just by who we surround ourselves with. It can rub off on you. You can hang out with the wise and be wise. You can hang out with the fools and be a fool. That's his point here. So when he's talking in their printout that I've given you here, when he's saying the power of friendship can be used for bad, that's exactly what it's talking about. But it also can be used for good, can't it? Turn to Proverbs 13. I didn't even get a quarter of the way where I wanted to go. Thank goodness I didn't remember my notes. Hey, keep this. Please read all the attached scriptures for next week because we're going to pick up right there. Thank you all.